Hi, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Haven't posted much the last few days because we were away for a few days celebrating a milestone wedding anniversary, and thinking of that and thinking back to when someone photographed our wedding, I thought I'd do something on weddings today and wedding photography. In other words, there are people out there, young keen photographers with all the latest gear, probably thinking I could make some money out of wedding photography. How do I get started? Is it worth it? Is it safe to do this? So I'm going to do a bit of a random talk about some of my wedding photography and the training I've done for other people over the years. And also, please take a note that I'll put some links in underneath this video. There's heaps of stuff on my blogs. There's about 27 items under wedding photography on my main blog. And there's also about another 7 or so in the playlist here on wedding photography. And over the years I trained many people in wedding photography. So a little bit about it, and just some thought starters for you. We'll see what happens. I haven't really written down a structure of this, but I've got something that some ideas that I'd like to share. So from the course I used to teach on wedding photography, and I'm still available to teach that to anyone that wants it, and sometimes people come to me on an individual basis and I teach them the ins and outs of wedding photography. From the course that I developed, which is and I mentioned this on my YouTube channel before, and also on my blog. This one is Introduction to Wedding Photography by Jeff Thompson. Here's a nice shot from a wedding on the back there that I did some years back. And I've got all my notes and questions and guides and everything in there. I'll show you some of the photos that are in here in a minute. But I first started doing weddings in 1975 for my wife's sister and also my own brother on consecutive weekends in January 1975. And it's only a couple of years back that I did my last photos on a wedding. I anticipate that even though I'm retired from all that stuff now, too many aches and pains to do it on a regular basis, but I'll probably end up, if a couple of my nieces and nephew end up getting married, that I might take a few shots at their wedding without being the professionally hired photographer. So, where do we go from here? One of the things, of course, when you start out is you are pretty much an amateur when you first start. So how do you get started? And I started by people like my relatives started asking me, and then it got further and further. There were people who were just people that I knew through church, and then the wider community, and then people started ringing me and contacting me and whatever. And so then I was on my way to being a wedding photographer. So one of the things that was very helpful for me in the first place, and these days you get a lot of information on the internet on how to do wedding photography. There's heaps of it out there, and it's really good stuff. I'll probably put some links underneath to, well, no, I won't. I'll just give you some names afterwards, because people don't often like to be linked, and they think you're taking advantage of their YouTube channel and their expertise. So one of the things that was very helpful to me, and these days you look on the internet, was way back in the day, there was an Australian wedding photographer called Hawthorne, and he was considered by many to be the doyen of Australian wedding photographers. In fact, he used to write a regular column in one of the photography magazines, and quite often about wedding photography, and I used to read them avidly. He brought out a couple of videos which really were very helpful to me back then, VHS videos. They're called Pro Photo Techniques, Volume 1 and Volume 2, and Part 1 and Part 2. Volume 1 was about window light photography by a photographer called Joy Henry, which I also have, which was very good, which I learned a lot from that. But this is a complete study on wedding, I'll just hold that up while I read it, a complete study on wedding photography. A complete study video on wedding photography. The emphasis is on simplicity and working quickly to produce a series of exceptional wedding portraits that will not fail to sell. Master photographer Hawthorne guides the viewer through each stage of the wedding, demonstrating hundreds of exciting poses that can be set up in the minimum of time almost anywhere. Someone down here said, who was the editor of the Creative Image magazine or something, Ron Stillwell in England, said definitely the best video I've ever seen, possibly the best teaching and available in any format. Equally useful for both the veteran professional and the keen amateur. VidMag are setting new standards of quality not seen before in our industry. I don't think this ever came out on DVD. It may have, and you'd be hard pressed to find a copy of it these days. But sometimes when I've taught my course, I've shown young people this. They think it's a bit old-fashioned, a bit quaint, but there's a wealth of information in there, plus a study booklet that goes with it. So that was very helpful to me. On my course, I'll read out, and I've repeated this elsewhere on my blogs or on YouTube, but one of the early weddings that I did was a friend of my wife's, and she knew I did weddings and asked me if I'd be interested, or I might have volunteered, I don't know. But anyway, I said, yes, I'll do your wedding for you. And that was very early in the piece. I'd done a few by that stage, probably about a dozen. And anyway, she wasn't all that confident about me doing it, but she wanted me to do it, and she bought me a Peterson's how-to guide on photography, on wedding photography by Gunn. I don't know whether you ever heard of Gunn, but that was a wonderful book. I mean, I was a bit taken aback when she gave it to me, because it was a how to do weddings, a bit like this other one, these videos. And but that was brilliant, and I still have that here. I was trying to find it so I could show it to you, but I still have it here somewhere. But that was amazing, and he was a very accomplished wedding photographer. You can look him up on the internet and find out about Gunn. But anyway, here are a couple of the things, and then also I got hold of, I started collecting magazines or booklets on wedding photography. This one's called The Professional Techniques for the Wedding Photographer, a complete guide to lighting, posing and taking photographs that sell, by George Shaub. And that's a brilliant book. I like to keep these as a reference book, particularly when I'm teaching other people. This one here is another really good one, Wedding Photography, Art, Business and Style by Steve Sint. You can probably still get some of these. These are, the people who produced them were, this one was by the Silver Pixel Press. And then there was another one here, a Wedding Photography, a Professional Guide by Morag MacDonald. That's that one there, and that's really good. And these were all, 20 years ago these were coming out, some of these. And Contemporary Wedding Photography, which is another really good one as well. That was by Julie Oswin and Steve Walton. And all the magazines I used to get. And another good resource, which I had here somewhere. Another good resource is the Australian Bride magazines. I'd go into news agencies and there'd be all these bridal magazines attracting people to different vendors. And this was from, I don't know how long ago this was. Don't know when this one was printed. Probably at least 20 years ago, maybe longer. And it certainly had lots of examples of local contemporary photographers around Australia in this book, and those are great reference books to get hold of, to learn. You can always learn from somebody else. So this is what I have in the start of my wedding photography course. I'm always open to inquiries if you want to do that on an individual basis with me, either via internet or if you live in Adelaide, one-to-one in person. I've thought about putting it online and seeing what happens. So to become a master of photography of weddings, this is Rocky Gunn. This is what he had in his book. To become a master photographer of weddings, one must be an accomplished portraitist, an illustrator, a photojournalist, a director, and probably a psychologist. A wedding photographer must also be able to photograph architecture and fashion, or in short, a master wedding photographer must be accomplished in many things. I can totally agree with that. You have to be all of that. And then George Shaub, I just showed you his book before. In the front of his book he says, people who don't like people have no business taking people pictures, and most of all wedding photography is a people business. You've got to be a people person if you want to consider yourself as a a would-be wedding photographer, or you want to really go on with it. Professional photography, this is Michael Warshall, who's long been a well-known name in Australian photography. Professional photography is a business like any other. You need to plan for the future, and you need the knowledge to help you get there. Michael Warshall. That's W-A-R-S-H-A-L-L. And then Ian Hawthorne, who I showed you the videos, he said, it is an art in one of his articles in one of the magazines I've got somewhere. He said, it's an article of faith to me that the really great wedding pictures are still to be made. And you know, he was operating, he's I think he's dead now, but he was operating many years ago, and his photography was really nice in a very classical style, and I copied that style and then developed my own style after a while. But I used a lot of his guidelines on how to pose people and how to set people up in photos and all that sort of stuff. It was very useful, because one of the first things that you don't know, if you haven't done much photography, you've done photography, but you really haven't done any professional photography or people paying you to do it. It's all very well to photograph family shots and parties and things like that. But when you're doing it professionally, you need to know a bit more about what to do. So you really need to learn the art of posing and people management and all sorts of things like that. And it's just not such a simple thing to do, because the first thing you find when you go on your first wedding, and I struck this a few times, I didn't have any idea of how to pose people until I started investigating and learning. And I remember on one wedding I was doing, it was a bit embarrassing. I was doing this wedding and I was trying to photograph the bridal party and the family groups and things out the side of this church, and I wasn't going too well. In fact, I was having a bit of a meltdown that day. I was having a bit of a panic attack, and this girl came up who obviously had some experience, and she helped me set up a few shots, and I was very pleased that she did. But anyway, I always remember that. It was very embarrassing, because in the early days you can be prone to panic attacks when you're trying to do a wedding and you don't really know everything. You're just starting out. And even last night, which is probably what prompted me to do this today, is that in the early hours of the morning when you tend to be having dreams, I had that classic situation of you're doing a wedding and everything's going wrong. And please be assured that that will happen to you while you are a practicing wedding photographer, and also after you've retired. It's long since I've been actively involved, but every now and then I have a dream where everything's going wrong. I've lost my camera, or I can't do this, I can't do that. So it can be stressful. So if you don't want the stress, but you can, of all that sort of thing doing your weddings, probably best to stay out of it. But if you're a competent photographer and you're a people person and you are willing to learn, you can overcome all that stress. On a couple of occasions, I have had to work under extreme stress photographing a wedding. One was the wedding I was booked for to do a wedding on the Saturday and a wedding to do on the Sunday, and my dad was actually dying, and it didn't look like he was going to last the weekend. In actual fact, he didn't. So the wedding that I was doing, I think I was doing 2 weddings, yeah, for the studio I was working for, and because I was doing that on a part-time basis as well as doing my own shoots. And I said, look, I don't think can you find someone else to do the Sunday wedding? Which they said, yes, we can. They had a team of photographers, and but I chose to go ahead and do the one on the Saturday. My dad actually died that Saturday night, so all those thoughts are going through my mind. But if you are trained in what you do and you know what you're doing, sometimes it's a help to be able to just concentrate on doing something like that, to take your thoughts off of what's actually occurring. There's other serious occasions happen when I was doing weddings, but I'd tell you that on another forum perhaps. But one of the things that was also very difficult, and one of my most favourite weddings I've ever done, was on Kangaroo Island a few years back, about 10 or 11 years ago now. Kangaroo Island in South Australia, and it was a beautiful wedding, but the night before the wedding, on the Friday night, waiting to do that on the Saturday morning, we had a phone call to say that my wife's father had just died. and we were there stranded. We couldn't get back to be with family. We were committed to do the wedding. So, but we got through it, and some of the best photos I've ever done, because it's like you just go into professional mode. You've got to be able to deal with that sort of stress. So, but you can get to that point where you are so good at what you are doing that you can do things under extreme adversity. Believe me, I've done it, and I know what it's like. So, where am I going with this? Goodness me. Perhaps I'll show you a few samples of some shots, wherever I put it. I'll just grab out a few of these things here in my folder, which is where I teach photography. This one here has to be one of my all-time favourite photographs of a wedding. It was over in New South Wales. It was my niece's wedding, and they had an infinity pool there, and we didn't know this was going to happen. They were doing a bridal waltz, and I was standing right behind them and watching them do the bridal waltz, and then I thought, oh, something strange is going on here, because he started taking things out of his pockets. Then the next thing you know, they turned and plunged and jumped into the pool, and I caught this right at the peak of action. I had my camera ready, the autofocus on my Canon 400D did the rest, and then I kept shooting though once they hit the water, and got some beautiful shots. But that's what you call capturing the moment and really nailing it. It's one of my most favourite wedding photographs ever. One young girl came to me a few years ago, and she just started doing families and baby photographies, or mainly baby stuff, and she was very worried about her skills. So she had heard about me. She came and I taught her some of the basics of photography, because she was taking shots and people were paying her, and she didn't really know how the camera worked. Anyway, I said, if you ever want to do a wedding, I'll come with you and help you on that first wedding, or even the second one. In fact, I ended up doing a couple with her, I think, because she kept saying no to people that were asking her because they liked what she did. She had a really good eye. Anyway, this is just a shot I took of her. It was a fantastic wedding. There was a lot of tattoos and very different people. And anyway, I took a shot of her like this. She's the wedding photography in the black and white dress, and the couple, I said, let's take a shot of you guys photographing Alicia. And that's this shot. I love that photograph. And you've got to think on your feet and think of different ways to do things when you're doing weddings. Put that back there. What else have I got here? Pardon me. Sometimes when special effects were just coming in, I did this one here with some playing around in Photoshop with that, I think, just to give it a bit of a dramatic effect in black and white. And that's quite a nice shot. In my course, these are some of the shots from the Kangaroo Island wedding, actually. I don't know whether you can see them there. And I'm intending to do something more with that wedding. The bride has given me permission to use her photos for what I'm doing on the internet, and I might take her up on that. So on these, you can print out on your printer, you can print out sort of like proof sheets of all the shots you take, which are very handy when you're going through a training course with people. This one here is what I used as a business card photograph, really. Which was in Broken Hill, which is a country outback town in New South Wales, which is closer to South Australia than New South Wales. So the people there, we do a lot with those people there. But this was on a memorial for miners that had died, I think, in the war or something like that, and it was up on the top of this sort of big slag heap, I suppose. There's a restaurant up there where the wedding reception was. But this was me my assistant who was helping me that day took a photo of me taking a photo of the couple with the sun setting behind them and framed in that structure there. And I used that for a while as a business card type photo. So there's lots of, as I said before, lots of references on my blogs. I've got 2 blogs that basically deal with photography, and my main blog has got heaps of wedding photography stuff on it there as well. And also on here you'll find, if you go through the playlist, you'll find some of this things that I've been talking about here as well. So be encouraged, don't be discouraged. If you think you've got it in you to be a wedding photographer, have a go. And it'll be family and friends and people you know that will ask you if they know that you're doing a lot of photography. But my advice is to find a professional photographer you can go along with and watch what they do. And by the time you do your first wedding, if there's someone around like me, you could ask a retired wedding photographer to come along with you and just hold your hand on the day. When I was first starting out and I was working for myself and also for a studio, I learned a lot by working for a studio. And the lady there, Jenny, she had a team of about 5 or 6 photographers working for them in the wedding studio, and she asked me, or advised me, it might be a good idea to go along with one of the female wedding photographers and just what she did. And I learned heaps by going out with her and watching how she went about things. One of the things I teach on the course, just speaking of that, is that if you are female as against male, there are some ways you have an edge over us guys when dealing with brides and bridesmaids, and you can bring the feminine touch to your wedding photography. Something that us blokes find difficult at times, but you learn to do it. You know, you tap your inner woman type, whatever it is that's in there somewhere. But yeah, you have a unique perspective if you're a lady, female wedding photographer, to relate to your clients in a very special way, which I couldn't do because I really watched what she was doing. The downside of being a female wedding photographer in this days of people copying abuse because you're a girl, she told me that happened all the time. And not all the time, but she really had lots of suggestive remarks making and inappropriate things happening. And I have another friend who did my wedding photography course, and she would tell you the same thing, but she was pretty handy with her mouth and she would shut them up pretty quick. So anyway, that's digressing a bit. So I hope this has been interesting for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll put a few links in there, and please contact me if you want to ask questions about wedding photography, or if you've got any comments to make. I'd be interested in hearing what you've got to say. So I'll see you next time. Like if you like, subscribe if you wish, and keep up the good work. See you later.